Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the NFL draft, gave you guys a little bit of an update as we are only 2 weeks out from the first round and getting this thing kicked off. But let's jump into a couple of the biggest needs for some teams in the portal. We have a huge portal slew coming up. We have a ton of players that have already made their intentions known, a ton of players that have not made their intentions known, but will very, very soon. I do want to amend something from yesterday. I did a segment talking about the players that have already entered. I mentioned Bear Alexander in that segment. He turns out is not entering the transfer portal. There were rumors around him, there were reports around him, but he came out yesterday, shot all those down, said he is committed to USC. So want to apologize for just being a little bit too out in front of that one. But at the end of the day, he's someone I'm going to definitely keep my eye on, definitely watch throughout this process. But as of right now, he seems very, very solid with USC. But let's jump into these teams and give you an idea of where there are holes and where they need to be filled. And let's start with Oklahoma, and it's because it's the easiest one on this list. O-line is where they absolutely need people to come in. This is one where you have a couple of people that are playing really good ball. Apparently, their guards are playing really well. Meta Hour, I believe, is one of their guards. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but at the end of the day, they're going to need way more than two guys at guards to be really good. They had their center get injured. They've had not too great of play from the tackles because they're losing guys like Tyler Guyton, and losing a guy like Caden Green is absolutely huge. This team's success is directly tied to Jackson Arnold's ability to execute this offense efficiently. And that is directly tied to the O-line's ability to protect him. So all of this is always circles back to the trenches. It always does. It's the way that this sport works. But especially for Oklahoma, if they don't want to fall on their face the first year in the SEC, that O-line is going to need to be a lot stronger and a lot deeper than it is right now. So I expect them to be very, very active when it comes to the offensive line position. Other than that, this is a very solid roster. I think they could dip their toe in for a couple of different positions, but O-line is where they're going to put a lot of energy towards. For Ole Miss is a really tough one, to be totally honest with you. This is a remarkably talented roster, pretty much up and down. That we've talked about the transfer portal class. They brought in so many guys on defense that are just incredible. But at the end of the day, there's always a couple little holes that you could patch a little bit better. So I think running back is one that is a little bit interesting. Obviously, you lose Quinshon Judkins. You have a couple other guys in there like Ulysses Bentley. You have Logan Diggs came over from LSU. I believe Henry Parrish is coming over from Miami or has been crystal balled to them. So I think they'll be okay at that position. It's always interesting because you never really know what a position room looks like until you actually see it on the field. So obviously, if they do dip their toe in for a running back, I think it's because they definitely need one. But as of right now, I think the way I look at it, at least, the running back is not necessarily my biggest position of need. I'd worry a little bit more about the back end of this defense, although it's still very talented. They added a number of really good transfer portal guys that could play big-time roles for them. Trey Amos came over from Alabama, was one of the bigger ones. And it's one of those things where you know that you have a lot of talent in that room. You know that you have a lot of ability in that room. You're not necessarily sure if you have five guys that are going to play in unison in that room. So I wonder kind of how they're looking at that, if they're going to, dip their toe in for a cornerback or a safety, because I think it could definitely help at the very least, just to give them kind of a peace of mind that if a couple of these transfer portal guys are not who we necessarily thought they were, or just aren't hitting the way that they are capable of hitting, I think having a couple more in your back pocket never hurt anyone. So I think that's definitely a position where Ole Miss at the very least could bolster this roster that became just remarkably more talented this year compared to last year. But let's move on to the Big 12 and let's talk about Kansas State. The Kansas State, I have cornerback down as their biggest need. Kind of you could do just kind of secondary as a whole, but they've lost Kobe Savage to Oregon this past offseason, who was a huge player for them. He was kind of the leader of the back end of that defense, was definitely someone that when you met him in the hole, it was an aggressive collision at the very least. So he was someone that was kind of a tone setter for them, was very, very big for them, but he is on his way to Eugene, Oregon. So you're going to have to find a replacement there. I've talked about Jacob Parrish at corner a little bit. I think he's someone that could have a big-time year, but across the Big 12, you're going to have multiple receivers that could really, really hurt you. So having one guy that you feel confident in is not enough. So I think it's very possible that Kansas State tries to find at least a couple more corners to kind of build out that room, make sure that they have two guys on either side of the field that can at least keep up. I think Jacob Parrish will be more than fine with whoever he matches up with, but you got to have someone else out there that has that same level of confidence, and I think they'll have to go to the portal to get that. But let's move on to the other team that seems to be the cream of the crop in the Big 12 going into this season, and that's Utah. I've kind of circled the linebacker and edges as kind of the biggest areas of need in this portal class. They do return, in terms of linebackers, they do return Lander Barton, who got injured in the first game of the season last year, which was a huge loss for them. Getting him back into the fold will be absolutely huge for their success this year. And then on the edge, you're losing someone like Jonah Ellis, who is as big of a player as there possibly could be for this team. He was absolutely a game wrecker for them last year. He opened up so many doors for the back end of that defense to have some easier plays, some easier ability to make those plays just because of the pressure that he got on the quarterback pretty much every time he was on the field. So I think that one's going to be remarkably tough to replace. One of the things about Utah that I think we all know at this point is Kyle Whittingham is going to get the best out of whatever he has. So even if they don't dip their toe into the portal in this round, I probably think they will just to get a couple more guys. But even if they don't, Kyle Whittingham is going to put together a good defense. He's going to have someone that we don't know the name of now that we will know the name of at the end of the year. So although I think they definitely could use some help at those positions, I think if Kyle Whittingham doesn't do anything at those positions, I'm not necessarily in a position to criticize him for that by any means. So I definitely think they have the ability to be remarkable in their first year of the Big 12, but definitely some positions they could build out a little bit more. But let's move on to the ACC here. And let's start with Miami. I've pegged wide receiver as kind of a position of need for them. Now, they have Xavier Restrepo, and he is one of the best wide receivers in the entire country. He is going to be an absolute game changer for them. Jacoby George is a good player. He is someone that has kind of had flashes, been kind of a little bit up and down. But at the end of the day, if Miami wants to do what they are capable of doing with this offense, and especially with Cam Ward under center, they need as many dynamic and as many weapons as possible. So the reality is, Xavier Restrepo can be awesome, and Jacoby George can make some big-time plays, but you need more than just two guys. You need tons of guys that you can spread the ball out to, especially if, there's that chance of injury and all of this different stuff that could happen. So I definitely think this is a position of need. They lost Colby Young to UGA, so I think they could be looking for one kind of a speedster to kind of stretch the field using kind of gadget plays, end arounds, that type of thing. And then they need a big 50-50 red zone guy, that Colby George type of play, or Colby Young, type of player, because he is an absolute game changer for them in the red zone, or at least he was, and they're going to need someone else to step up into that position. So I think wide receiver at least could use a little bit more of a build out. They don't need a wide receiver one by any means, because Xavier Restrepo will be that guy, but definitely could use a 2 and possibly even a 3 in that room. So I'll be watching that very closely, and then we'll continue on to North Carolina State in the ACC, and this one's relatively easy. It's D-line. Peyton Wilson was kind of a hybrid linebacker edge type guy, but he disrupted the quarterback a lot, which helped the D-line a lot. So he's someone that kind of plays into this a ton, and you definitely need guys that you're probably not going to replace him with one dude. That's just kind of the reality. Peyton Wilson was an absolute game wrecker last year, and replacing him with one guy is going to be insanely tough. But they have a couple of guys in there right now that could make difference, but they need some big-time guys on the interior. There are going to be teams in this league, mainly Clemson is the one that I'm pointing to the most, that are going to run the ball very, very consistently and going to run it a lot. So you're going to have to be very, very strong on the interior, have multiple guys you can rotate in there. And NC State is just a little bit thin at that position. So I definitely will be watching them there. Add them to the list of the teams that need D-line help, because it is a ton of them across the country, and supply will not meet demand. I can tell you that pretty confidently. But another team that needs D-line help is USC. Obviously, Bear Alexander, he says that he is sticking around there, which is absolutely huge news for them. Keeps them a little bit more confident on the D-line, but I definitely think they could use some more help. Bear Alexander struggled a little bit last year, mainly because he didn't have anyone next to him that was a big-time threat. So he was getting double teamed. He was getting kind of buried a lot of plays because they knew he was the guy that could hurt them. So they're going to need someone else to put next to him. They're going to need someone else to take up some attention on that inside and let Bear Alexander be the guy that he can be, because I talked about it yesterday. He is a Sunday type player. He has the ability to be a big-time player at the NFL, but at the end of the day, he can't do that if you don't let him show his ability. So they're going to need to get some big boys up front. They're going to need to compete with the Big Ten offensive lines, who are just mean pretty much across the conference. So I think that's definitely a position of need if USC wants to do anything but, barely make a bowl game this year, essentially. And then finally, let's finish it off with Iowa and its quarterback. I don't think there's any question about that. I don't think anyone has any objections to that. They do have Cade McNamara, who was the quarterback at Michigan before coming on over, but he's been out all spring. He has been hurt. He has been nursing an injury, and they're not exactly sure when he's going to be coming back and what he'll look like when he comes back, because that's kind of the biggest question, right? You never really know how guys are going to deal with injuries, how they're going to kind of get back up to speed, especially with a new offense coming into play with Tim Lester, the new offensive coordinator. That becomes even tougher. So all these things are going to get really interesting. They have Deacon Hill, who, has done his best at Iowa. He has served them well. He has come in at really, really inopportune points and played, serviceable football at times, but if they really want to compete, they have to have a better safety option than him. And it's no disrespect to Deacon Hill. He's a remarkable athlete and can do a number of different things, but you need more guys, and you need a dude that can actually lead this offense with remarkable amount of confidence. So I wouldn't even be surprised if the guy they pick up in this portal cycle is the starter come fall, because I think him and Cade McNamara are kind of working from the same point, where both of them are still kind of learning this offense. Cade McNamara obviously has a big head start in that, but not going through live reps is a huge part of learning the offense. So not being able to do that is really tough for Cade McNamara, and it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds. I tend to believe that if there's a quarterback that comes on the market, Iowa might be the first person calling them. So I'll definitely keep my eye out on that. But we're going to take our final break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about a Hot Take Thursday, and we're going to talk a little bit about this UGA offense and what I think they're capable of in 2024. So stick with us, and we'll be right back with that.